Letitia, James Slanders, Kash Patel, directly again. Kash's following words destroy Letitia's career. The studio lights at the View were warm, but no one felt comfort. It was Monday morning. The countdown to broadcast had begun. Letitia James, New York's Attorney General, sat at the center of the table. Her blazer was sharp, her posture sharper. She didn't smile often on air, but today there was a quiet edge to her. The red light above camera 3 blinked on. "We're live in 5, whispered the producer through her headset. Letitia leaned slightly forward as the show began. Her voice cut through the room with practiced confidence. "Let's talk about Kash Patel," she said, flipping a card flat on the desk. "You may remember him, Trump's legal bulldog. Loud when it serves him, quiet when it doesn't." There was a pause, intentional, pointed. "He's not just controversial. He's dangerous to national security." The words hung in the air. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or gasp. Some did both. In the control room, Lisa Turner, the show's senior producer, went still. Her earpiece buzzed with anxious chatter. That line hadn't been approved. Letitia didn't care. She kept going. "I've spoken with sources," she continued, "credible sources. They believe Patel may have leaked sensitive intelligence during the transition period. To partisan media, for political gain, no documents, no dates, just smoke." Susan Blake glanced to Tina Morgan across the table. Tina blinked. Whoopi Goldberg stared down at her mug. No one interrupted. "Now, if you ask me," Letitia added, her voice dipping lower, "this man's being prepped for something bigger. A role in some shadow cabinet, and the public needs to know." Applause flickered, then grew. The audience didn't know what they were applauding, but they felt the cue. Backstage, Lisa Turner murmured, "Cut the feed if she pushes it further." But she didn't push the button. Not yet. Letitia knew the rules. She danced just close enough to the edge. She wasn't delivering facts. She was delivering theater disguised as truth. And she knew one thing for certain: Kash Patel wasn't going to respond. He never did. 250 miles south in Washington, D.C., Kash Patel sat behind his desk. The video of Letitia's segment played again on the screen in front of him. He didn't blink. He didn't scowl. He just watched. Daniel Reyes, his communications director, hovered near the door phone in hand. "They said it, live," Daniel confirmed quietly. Kash nodded once. The silence in his office wasn't peaceful. It was deliberate. He tapped the edge of the desk with one finger. Precise, rhythmic, unmoving. "Should we draft a denial?" Daniel asked. "Something sharp or legal. We can threaten action, call a press conference, loop in allies." "No," Kash said, still watching. He leaned back, calm, controlled. And then he said 2 words. "Book me." Daniel blinked. "Sir, I'm going there," Kash replied. "Today." Daniel's pulse spiked. "They didn't invite you? That's a closed format. You're not?" Kash raised a hand, not to silence, to set a boundary. "They went live. Named me, slandered me. And now they think I'll retreat behind a tweet." Daniel swallowed. "Should we call producers? Try to negotiate airtime?" Kash shook his head. "No back channels. Call the front desk. State my name, my role, and tell them why I'm coming." Daniel hesitated. And the reason? Kash stared at the screen. Letitia's face was frozen mid-sentence. Correction. Within minutes, an email hit ABC Studios. The subject line was one word: correction. Lisa Turner read it twice. "Kash Patel just requested a same-day appearance," she said aloud. "No pre-tape, no prep, no legal rep. Just live." Her assistant looked up. "Does he know it's a live segment?" Lisa nodded. He said that's the point. Outside the studio, a black Suburban with diplomatic plates turned the corner. Inside, Kash Patel adjusted his cuffs. He carried no phone, no entourage, just a leather folder under one arm. Daniel sat silently beside him, already fielding calls from network contacts and press outlets. He knew what Kash was doing wasn't just bold, it was surgical. "You sure about this?" he asked. Kash looked out the window. Letitia didn't expect I'd respond. A beat passed. She underestimated the wrong man. Inside ABC Studios, the air changed. Producers whispered behind clipboards. Floor managers adjusted lighting and cue cards. Security doubled at the rear entrance. Joy Behar wasn't on today's broadcast. Letitia James was. Lisa Turner turned to her assistant. Get floor control ready and prepare a fallback schedule. Do we brief Letitia? No, Lisa said flatly. She'll know the moment he walks in. Letitia was in the dressing room. Someone knocked on her door. She didn't look up from her notes. Who is it? Kash Patel, the voice said. He's here. Letitia finally glanced at the mirror. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. In the hallway, the silence broke. Kash Patel walked with purpose. His shoes echoed sharply across the tile. He didn't glance at the bulletin boards or the crew. One assistant carrying cables froze when he saw him. Another whispered under her breath, "He looks like he already won. No makeup team, no talking points, no drama. Just truth in a folder under his arm." At the live feed entrance, the floor manager tried to intercept. Mr. Patel, segment 3 is wrapping. We weren't expecting? I'm not here to lounge, Kash said. Point me to the door. The studio of The View thrived on heat arguments, applause, and headlines. But what was about to unfold wasn't on the rundown. The clock read 10:58 a.m. Segment 3 was wrapping. The panel was in mid-discussion, an easy topic, something forgettable about celebrity divorces. No one noticed the quiet storm building just off stage, until the door opened. And Kash Patel walked in, not backstage, not escorted, not during commercial. He walked in live. There was no cue, no announcement, no music, no dramatic lighting, just the heavy click of his shoes striking the studio floor as he made his way toward the table, uninvited, undeterred, unmistakably calm. Letitia James was mid-sentence. Her words stalled. And if you think, her voice dropped off as she saw him. The audience hushed. Whoopi Goldberg sat forward slightly, brows raised. Susan Blake fumbled with her note cards. Tina Morgan blinked, hard-mouthing to a producer off stage. Is this real? Letitia's posture shifted. Just a little, just enough. Kash didn't smile. He didn't wave. He didn't scan the audience for a camera. He walked straight to the center. Not with anger, with precision. The folder remained under his arm, tight to his side like a brief in-court. His eyes locked not on the audience, not on the producers, but squarely on Letitia James. She didn't blink, but she also didn't speak. Kash stopped at the edge of the table. No chair, no mic. He didn't need one. The silence was no longer tension. It was gravity. Letitia, he began, voice level, not loud, but clear enough for every corner of the room. I watched your segment this morning. He paused. I heard everything. Letitia attempted a tight smile. This is a talk show, she said. We offer perspective, not litigation. Kash's head tilted slightly. Perspective isn't the same as fabrication. Whoopi tried to interject. Maybe we take a beat here. I'm not here to debate emotion, Kash said, eyes still on Letitia. I'm here to correct a falsehood. From the wings, Lisa Turner whispered into her headset, Don't cut the feed. Let it roll. Kash opened his folder. This, he said, holding up a page for the camera, is a declassified memo, cleared by the Department of Defense and dated January 17th, 2021. It confirms that all statements made by me during the transition period were pre-reviewed and cleared for public disclosure. The audience sat frozen. This, he added, lifting a second sheet, is a signed clearance verification. It verifies that no breach occurred, no investigation was opened, and no internal concern was raised against me until this morning on this show. Letitia shifted in her chair. Tina's lips parted, but no words came out. Kash continued, still composed. You said, I endangered national security. That I leaked for political gain. On national television, without a shred of documentation. Letitia cleared her throat. I cited sources. No, you implied guilt, he said, without evidence. That's not civic duty. That's televised defamation. Whoopi leaned back, arms crossed. She wasn't defending Letitia anymore. She was watching something no one had expected, a live takedown, not fueled by rage, but by receipt. Susan glanced at the prompter. Nothing had prepared them for this. Letitia exhaled sharply. You weren't invited to this table, Kash. Then maybe, he replied, you shouldn't have made me the topic. The audience gasped. Not dramatically, not like a show, like people witnessing a shift. Behind the camera, a crew member whispered, he's flipping the room. Kash laid out the rest of the folder slowly. Here's the timeline of my advisory role. Here are the public clearance procedures. Here's the federal regulation you misquoted. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't interrupt. He simply placed each page like a chess move. Controlled, unrushed, unapologetic. This isn't about protecting my name, he said. It's about protecting the truth. Because when daytime television becomes a courtroom without rules, people stop distinguishing drama from reality. Letitia tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. Kash looked directly at her. You used your seat to accuse without inquiry, and now you're struggling because I responded not with rage, but with record. In the control room, Lisa Turner had stopped pacing. She stood still, headset silent. The live chat on the network stream was exploding. Kash Patel just turned the view into a court of truth. This wasn't a rebuttal. It was a reckoning. He didn't perform. He corrected. Producers flagged moments for social media. One time-stamped, maybe you shouldn't have made me the topic. Another, this isn't about ratings, it's about responsibility. Back on stage, Kash had one last page in hand. This, he said, holding it up, is the transcript from the same security briefing you referenced earlier, declassified this morning. If you had waited 24 hours, you'd have had it. Letitia's face remained frozen, but her fingers were twitching slight, involuntary. Whoopi spoke now softly. So, what do you want from us? Kash looked out at the audience, then back to the panel. Nothing, he said. I didn't come here for airtime. I came because the truth doesn't need a segment. It just needs to be said. He closed the folder. You can disagree with my politics, my past, even my role in prior administrations, but don't disagree with facts unless you're ready to replace them with your own. The audience slowly began to applaud, not wildly, but steadily. Not performance applause, acknowledgement applause. Letitia sat in silence. Kash didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply nodded once and stepped back from the table. He hadn't been invited, but he had arrived, and he had finished what they started. The moment Kash Patel stepped off the set, the studio didn't move. Not right away. The lights were still on. The cameras were still rolling, but something deeper had shut off the illusion of control. Letitia James sat still in her chair. Her hands were locked together tightly, knuckles pale. Susan Blake slowly uncrossed her legs, glancing toward Whoopi. Tina Morgan blinked at the control booth, waiting for a cue that didn't come. No one said cut. No one rolled too commercial. No one even breathed too loudly. Because everyone hosts, crew, audience knew they'd just witnessed something live television rarely delivers: a reckoning without spectacle, a confrontation without chaos, a truth no one could cut. And just like that, the View's most carefully scripted day fell apart. Backstage, Lisa Turner stood frozen in front of the control board. Her headset dangled around her neck. A producer whispered behind her, "Should we go to break?" Lisa didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, she watched the playback rolling across every screen. It was still going. Every platform was mirroring the moment. No lag, no edits. Because someone smart had already uploaded the entire segment raw to YouTube, to X, to Instagram, to TikTok. It had no caption, no graphics, no intro. Just the title, Kash Patel walks in. Truth walks with him. 10 minutes later, it was trending. By 20, it was exploding. Kash Patel live. View unscripted. He brought facts. Correction, not chaos. Every platform buzzed with it. A political YouTuber with 4 million subscribers clipped the moment where Kash said, "Maybe you shouldn't have made me the topic." It hit 100,000 likes in under an hour. A Gen Z influencer on TikTok, known for fashion and sarcasm, posted a reaction reel. "I don't care who you are politically, this is how you show up." Calm, armed with facts, no notes. Even creators who didn't cover politics couldn't look away. Cable news scrambled. Fox News ran it on loop. Their chyron read, "Patel fires back, no permission needed." CNN ran a debate panel. Analysts were split. One called it brilliantly reckless, another called it procedurally flawless. MSNBC tried to downplay it, calling it a moment of misplaced ego. But the host stumbled when asked what part of the documentation was incorrect. They couldn't answer. Because Kash hadn't dropped opinions. He'd dropped receipts. Inside ABC's PR war room, everything was heat. 3 executives, 2 attorneys, and Lisa Turner sat in silence facing a wall of trend charts and live comments. The data was not friendly, engagement was spiking, but trust was fracturing. Their audience wasn't just divided, they were stunned and confused. Why hadn't Letitia responded with facts? Why hadn't The View allowed a response earlier? Why did it take a walk-in to correct a narrative? One of the lawyers finally broke the silence. He hasn't threatened legal action. Lisa shook her head. No, he doesn't have to. He's winning the narrative, another executive muttered, without touching the courts. A younger assistant added, he's doing something rarer than suing. He's letting the public decide. Elsewhere in D.C., Kash Patel sat at his desk again. Not because he had something to prove, because the fight was over, and he had won without swinging. Daniel Reyes stood nearby watching a live stream of TikTok reactions. He looked over his shoulder. They're saying it wasn't a confrontation, he said. It was a masterclass. Kash didn't answer. He didn't need to. Then came the calls. A producer from CNN, a host from Face the Nation, even a late-night comedy writer not to mock but to understand. One email subject line read, "The moment everyone stopped smirking." But Kash didn't respond. He wasn't chasing airtime. He was resetting the rules. That evening, The View released a vague, neutral-sounding statement. Today's show included unplanned and unscripted elements. We're reviewing our editorial protocols to ensure respectful and accurate dialogue. It didn't mention Letitia. It didn't mention Kash, but it mentioned fear, not in words, but in what was missing. No apology, no correction, just corporate fog. Kash replied not with a press release, not with legalese. He tweeted one line, "When institutions fear apology, it's because they fear accountability." That tweet broke 2 million impressions in 2 hours. Influencers reposted it, journalists highlighted it, former prosecutors cited it. It wasn't fire, it was a fuse, and it was still burning. Across the country, viewers who'd never seen The View before were watching. College professors paused lectures to show the clip. One law professor at Stanford posted, "We'll be analyzing this exchange in my media ethics seminar next week." Because it wasn't just a media moment, it was jurisprudence in real time. Letitia James, meanwhile, stayed silent. No posts, no clarifications, no follow-ups, and that silence said more than a rebuttal ever could. Because Kash hadn't just dismantled an accusation, he'd exposed the machinery behind it. In the quiet of night, Daniel asked Kash a simple question. "So, what now?" Kash looked up from the last page of his folder. "We let them talk," he said. "And when they do, they'll either confirm the lie or prove the truth was never their goal." Daniel exhaled. "You want to respond to tomorrow's broadcast?" "No," Kash said. "I already did." The next morning, Letitia James was back on air. No red blazer, no sharp words, just a thin, calculated smile and a line that felt scripted. "Yesterday, we had an unexpected visitor on our show," she said, eyes scanning the cue cards. "Kash Patel thinks walking onto a stage with documents makes him a hero. But this isn't a courtroom, it's a conversation." Whoopi glanced sideways, saying nothing. Susan tapped her pen against the table twice. Tina's lips tightened. Letitia continued, "He walked in with facts, sure. But that doesn't make what he's done invisible. We've seen these tactics before." There was a pause. No applause, just static tension. Letitia pressed on. "He's not the victim here. He's just another political actor trying to rewrite his legacy." This time, even the sound engineer hesitated to cue the audience because something had shifted. And even Letitia could feel it. She wasn't pushing back. She was scrambling. And the silence that followed 10 full seconds of dead air said it all. In his office, Kash watched it unfold. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't speak. Because he knew something Letitia didn't. The internet doesn't blink either. And when it sees the truth, it doesn't forget. The next 24 hours didn't feel like recovery. They felt like revelation. Not just for The View, for everyone watching. Because this wasn't about a media clash anymore. It was about the power of showing up and what happens when the person being spoken about refuses to stay silent. At ABC headquarters, the energy was clinical, cold. Producers walked quickly. Assistants whispered instead of joked. Nobody was laughing at the coffee station. Lisa Turner stood in her office eyes on a projection screen. Charts danced with red lines, numbers, hashtags, and heat maps, but none of them could distract from the headline flashing across every tab: Kash Patel rewrites the media playbook live. Another alert popped up: Letitia James faces questions over unverified on-air claims. And then another: when the guest isn't invited but is unavoidable. Lisa rubbed her temple. "We should have known," she muttered. An executive VP leaned forward, arms crossed. "We didn't expect he'd come in like that." "No one did," Lisa replied. "That's the point." Another voice spoke from the corner. Sarah Malik, newly promoted head of strategic messaging, didn't look up from her iPad. "We're losing control of the narrative." Lisa didn't argue, because it was already gone. Out in the real world, things were shifting. This wasn't just another political flashpoint. It had morphed into a cultural phenomenon, because people weren't just reposting clips, they were discussing them. Podcasts recorded entire episodes breaking down the moment frame by frame. Former prosecutors posted threads analyzing Kash's pacing, timing, and delivery like it was a masterclass in deposition. On Reddit, a popular legal subforum pinned a comment: "He didn't shout. He didn't flinch. He brought documents to a conversation and changed the room." Influencers reacted with reverence, not because they agreed politically, but because they saw something rare. A man who didn't ask for attention, but commanded it anyway. Even the late-night shows changed tone. Normally, Kash would have been the punchline. But this time, they hesitated. Jimmy Kimmel paused mid-monologue and said, "Whatever you think about Kash Patel, he walked into a studio where no one wanted him, said his piece, and walked out with everyone watching. That's not normal. That's something else." At the White House, senior comms staff watched the fallout carefully. One aide turned to another, impressed. He didn't wait for clearance, didn't ask for permission. The reply: he didn't need it. Kash Patel wasn't just a former legal advisor anymore. He was a signal, a reminder that some people don't spin the news. They walk straight through it. Letitia James didn't release another statement, not yet, because anything she said now wouldn't feel like strength. It would feel like response, and that's what Kash had reversed, the power dynamics. She spoke first, he finished it. Meanwhile, Kash sat in his home office. No interviews, no live streams, just a cup of coffee, a laptop, and a folder that was now empty because everything in it had been shown. Daniel Reyes entered quietly, holding an envelope. "It's from ABC," he said. "Official." Kash opened it, read it, then handed it back. "They're asking you back," Daniel said, scanning the letter. "Live. On air. They say it's to clarify previous interpretations." Whatever that means. Kash leaned back. He didn't smile, but something shifted in his eyes. "They waited until they saw the metrics," he said. "Now they want a truce." Daniel hesitated. "You want to go?" "No," Kash said. "I want to set the rules." He stood. "Let them know I'll return. But this time, no interruptions, no segment cuts, no filtered questions." Daniel blinked. "That's going to rattle them." Kash nodded once. "Good." Across town, Lisa Turner's phone lit up. She read the message, then whispered to her assistant, "He's coming back." Under what terms? Lisa looked up. His. The reaction wasn't panic. It was adjustment. Because the people behind the show knew the difference between a guest and a reckoning. And Kash Patel wasn't returning to participate. He was returning to conclude. The stage was polished. The coffee was warm. The smiles were rehearsed. But nothing about today felt normal. Kash Patel was coming back to The View. Not as a surprise, not through the side door. This time they knew he was coming, and it terrified them more. 11:00 a.m. sharp. Camera 3's red light blinked on. The theme music played, but the applause light stayed off. Even the audience sensed it. This wasn't a typical episode. Letitia James sat at the far right of the panel. Her expression was neutral, but her fingers tapped the desk out of rhythm. She hadn't slept well. Whoopi Goldberg leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Susan Blake adjusted her notes. Tina Morgan watched the monitor, not the camera. Then the doors opened, and Kash Patel entered. He wore no earpiece, carried no phone. Just a charcoal suit and a black leather folder tucked under one arm. No entourage, no fanfare, just presence. The audience didn't clap. They didn't know if they were supposed to. He didn't sit immediately. He placed the folder on the table, looked directly at Letitia, and said, "You wanted clarity. Here I am." Letitia gave a tight smile. "Let's keep it civil, Mr. Patel." Kash nodded. "Let's keep it factual." The studio stilled. Whoopi cleared her throat. "All right, Kash, last time you were here, you interrupted our show." "No," he said. "Last time I finished your sentence with truth." The tension snapped taut. Letitia leaned forward. "You seem to think facts erase consequences." Kash opened his folder. Slowly, calmly. "This," he said, lifting the first page, "is the internal memo your team referenced. You quoted it redacted. Here's the full version with verification from the originating agency." He slid it across the table. Susan picked it up, scanned the header, and blinked. It was real. Stamped, time-stamped. Letitia didn't touch it. Kash continued. "You said I leaked intelligence. You didn't cite a date, a source, a statute." "This," he said. "Pulling a second document is a clearance record from the Department of Defense confirming that no unauthorized disclosures occurred." Letitia opened her mouth, but Kash held up a hand not to silence, but to pause. "You can disagree with me politically. That's fine. But disagreement isn't a license to defame. If we let televised assumptions stand in for evidence, then we stop informing the public and start manipulating them." Whoopi tried to pivot. "But surely you understand how your role under the Trump administration." Kash cut in, not sharply, but decisively. "My role doesn't make me immune to criticism," he said, "but it doesn't make me a target for fiction either." In the control room, Lisa Turner whispered to the feed technician, "Don't cut. Just let him speak." Kash leaned forward, hands on the table. "I'm not here to win an argument. I'm here because when someone's character is reduced to applause lines and edited graphics, it damages more than one person. It damages trust." Letitia stared at him. "You act like you're above scrutiny." "No," Kash replied. "I'm just not below standards." That landed harder than any headline. The audience didn't clap. They held their breath. For the next 5 minutes, Kash walked through each false claim made during his first appearance. He cited law, policy, timeline. Every page in his folder had a purpose, and he never once raised his voice. It wasn't performance. It was precision. When he finished, he closed the folder. Then he looked around the table. "You host this show to challenge ideas. That's admirable, but challenge without accountability isn't brave. It's reckless." No one spoke, because no one could. Then Kash stood. "I've said what needed to be said." Letitia stared forward, lips pressed into a silent line. Whoopi finally said, "Do you want to stay for the next segment?" Kash shook his head. "I didn't come for airtime. I came for closure." He nodded once to the camera. Let the truth live without interruption. And then he walked out. Behind him, silence reigned. Not anger, not applause, just recognition. He hadn't asked to be heard. He simply refused to be erased. When Kash Patel walked off the stage for the second time, there were no spotlights trailing him. No reporters blocked the exit. No producers chased him with contracts or curated sound bites, and still the air felt different. Because some moments don't need volume to echo. They just need truth. The footage went viral again, but this time it wasn't shock that carried it. It was respect. Clips filled timelines not as gossip, but as proof. He walked back into the same room that slandered him, and never once raised his voice. He didn't argue. He corrected. Accountability doesn't shout, it walks in with receipts. On LinkedIn, leadership coaches posted breakdowns of Kash's demeanor under pressure. One wrote, "He didn't fight to be right. He came prepared to be clear." In law schools, his performance was clipped into ethics classes under a new lecture title, "Discourse Without Defensiveness." Letitia James remained quiet. Her office issued no new statement. Her feed went dark. Internally, sources said she was advised not to escalate. It wasn't fear of confrontation, it was fear of comparison. Because no matter what was said now, it would be measured against the stillness Kash left behind. At ABC, the tone had shifted. Ratings had jumped. But trust metrics, internal poll sentiment scans, online feedback had fractured. Lisa Turner sat in a closed-door meeting with network leadership. We scripted the show, she said. He unscripted the audience. An executive shook his head. And they loved it. We didn't lose control of the show, another said quietly. We lost ownership of the narrative. Sarah Malik, scanning digital trends, added, and he didn't even tweet a follow-up. He just walked off. Because that's what made it powerful. No campaign, no PR spin, just the simple, unbearable weight of being right. Back in D.C., Kash received no formal invites, no demands for interviews, but the messages poured in anyway, from young lawyers, from veterans, from college students, from moms. One letter, handwritten on notebook paper, simply read, I didn't know you before, but I know what I saw. Thank you for showing what clarity looks like when everyone else is trying to be loud. Kash didn't frame that letter. He didn't post it, but he kept it, folded neatly stored in the same folder that had once carried legal memos and clearance files, because sometimes the moment doesn't end when you walk off stage. Sometimes it starts there. Weeks later, a journalist asked him during a short-form interview, would you do it again? Kash didn't hesitate. In a heartbeat, he said, but not to win, to correct. She asked, and if they never acknowledge it, he smiled faintly. Then the audience will. The phrase caught on correct. Don't perform, show up, don't spin, say it, then walk away. It wasn't a slogan, it was a shift. Some said Kash Patel redefined media responsibility. Some said he embarrassed the view. Some said he just knew how to hold his ground. But what no one said, what no one could say, was that he'd overreacted. Because he hadn't. He'd done the thing most people are taught to avoid. He faced the camera, the crowd, the critique, and answered it not with outrage, but with order. The studio had returned to normal, or tried to, but beneath the smooth panels and bright lights something had cracked, and in its place, a reminder that in an era of noise, silence can still speak. That in a world chasing spin, truth still stands. And that sometimes the most powerful moment in a broadcast is when a man finishes the sentence someone else tried to write for him. Uninvited, unshaken, and absolutely unforgettable.